Hey Jeremy, thought I'd do a little video for you so that you and your dad can have a little recap of the stuff that we've talked about. Sorry you had a rough tournament, but hopefully it'll turn into a really good learning experience for us. So this was the swing that you sent that we decided we needed a little bit more bracing because you can see a little bit of that upper body stall through the release. You're still doing a much better job with your release pattern, so I feel like the transition that we're gonna work on should be able to have a relatively quick transition or implementation. So what we'll see is we're going to use the shoulders as kind of a reference. So this was your swing from earlier last week, and what you'll see is your overall pattern is that this left shoulder tends to work around, but it also tends to work up. Now, because of the way the camera works, up is actually going into right side bend instead of left side bend. It'll make more sense when we look at some pros and from some other angles. But what happened was it looks like in trying to get bracing, we ended up losing that side bend earlier. So you'll see as you start working down, that left shoulder kind of starts working up, actually pretty much straight from the top of the swing. So right through there, that left shoulder is starting to work up and you're starting to go into that right side bend. Instead of during transition, kind of getting into that lead leg and having that lead shoulder work a little bit more down. It's really that downward movement that tends to make it look like the lead shoulder is not rotating out of the way. And ironically, you were doing better with it before we started trying to work on bracing. So one important kind of rule to understand, at least in the terminology that we're trying to use, is bracing is a release movement, so it should happen kind of below here, where anything above that is going to be more of a transition movement. So it would make sense that the path was getting a little bit too much in to out and the bottom of the swing was moving back behind and we were getting more thin shots. So I think it'll make the most sense when we bring up some of the pros that we looked at when we were talking on some of these FaceTime calls. So first one we'll use is the model we like of Sergio, and what you'll see is that left shoulder actually working downward as the lower body is getting into that left side. So what we'll see is that left shoulder works downward, and we'll use a reference of when is the left shoulder kind of getting higher than the right, and you'll see that it's not until right about in here, just after he started the bracing, that he's now going into that left side bend. Sorry, it's hard to scrub clearly with Peter Costas drawing lines. Where we'll see that your left shoulder kind of gets slightly above your right early in the downswing, and that's what gives the look of the club getting underneath from the down the line. If I bring that back up real quick. So from the down the line, you'll see that you can see the appearance of that left shoulder working up, and you're not really in that danger position here, but as that left shoulder continues to work up, that will lower the hands more so than the arm movement, or sorry, lower the shaft more so than the arm movement. So if we imagined that all we did was raise that right shoulder and lower that left shoulder and kept the same lower body rotation, then what would happen is the shaft would be more or less there as opposed to where it is right now. So we'll look at a couple different views of some other tour pros so that you can kind of get the image of how that upper body crunch movement works during transition. So on the left we have Dustin Johnson. You'll be able to see it pretty clearly. Kind of through there you'll see that left shoulder working down as he continues to go into left side bend. So we saw when we looked at your 3D how the left side bend kind of lost its movement before the top of the swing. So we want to feel this left side bend kind of fluidly or spaced out evenly, evenly distributed through the entire backswing all the way until, let's say, right around there. So it's just left tilting a little bit into that early transition, and then as you go into the brace right through there, that's what causes that left side to kind of get up and out of the way. So you were doing that left side getting up and out of the way through transition, and that was just giving us a little bit of path issues, made it hard to recover. Here's a buddy of mine who played mini tours and was a really good ball striker, one of the best I've ever seen in person, and he was brave enough to set up his camera right on the target line, and you can see that left side working down right through there, and it's not until, you know, somewhere in here, thighs parallel, that left shoulder starts to really work up. So you can see the left shoulder is lower, 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 and then it starts working up kind of through here as he goes into that bracing movement. So if you're checking on video, you'll want to see that this left shoulder, instead of going around and up, works more down towards the golf ball during this early phase. So if you scrub back and forth when you take some video, you'll be able to see that. It may feel like your shoulders stay closed longer, but it's really that downward direction that's most important. From the down the line, if you look at kind of this part of your shoulder girdle and lat, you'll be able to see in yours that disappears very quickly, where what we were seeing with the other guys, we'll actually see that increase downward tilt slightly. So again, another good model of that. You'll see as it works down, you can see this part of his lat muscle kind of dropping down, where if we look at yours, you'll see it kind of working up and away really quickly or through that same phase. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's try to do a little bit better job of communicating, kind of, you know, just send me a quick text after each practice session, and that way I can kind of continue to help you work through this transition movement. But your swing has made a lot of good changes, so I think that this should really help tie things together. I've seen this be kind of one of the last pieces, so hopefully it works out that way for you, but keep me posted so that we can adjust as needed. And I know we got a little bit of time before the next one, so this should hopefully last us for a couple weeks and hopefully get you back to that ball striking and compression that you had a few weeks ago or a few years ago. So let me know if you have any questions about this and how to implement it, other than what we talked about with the pumps and broken transitions and stop and go drills that we discussed during the Skype call.